forbidden ink of the Middle Ages, the toxic colors of royal manuscripts. Tonight, we are going to sit very quietly beside a manuscript desk, not in a battlefield, not in a king's chamber, not in a smoky tavern, not in a plague street, not beside a castle wall or a muddy ditch or a body found at dawn. Tonight, we are going to sit with a scribe, an illuminator, a sheet of prepared parchment, a sharpened quill, a small knife, a polished stone, a few shells of color, and a collection of ingredients that are far less innocent than they look. Because the beautiful books of the Middle Ages were not made only from prayer, patience, and candlelight. They were also made from lead, from mercury, from copper, from arsenic, from iron salts, from sour wine, from oak galls, from gum, from egg white, from soot, from ground stone, from crushed minerals, from the bodies of insects, from gold beaten so thin that it trembled if anyone breathed too hard, and from the hands of people who spent long hours turning these dangerous, expensive, stubborn materials into pages worthy of kings. The result could be magnificent. A royal psalter glowing in red, blue, green, and gold. A gospel book with the robes of saints painted in deep mineral color. A charter written in dark ink that would sink into the skin of the page and remain legible for centuries. A book of hours small enough to hold, but rich enough to suggest that the owner expected heaven to notice good taste. These manuscripts look peaceful now. They sit behind glass. They appear in museum cases under soft light. Their pages are turned carefully by gloved hands, or not turned at all. Their colors seem delicate. Their gold seems holy. Their margins seem full of flowers, beasts, angels, kings, queens, prophets, vines, dragons, rabbits, and impossible little men doing unnecessary things with trumpets. But behind that beauty was a workshop full of substances that no modern safety officer would allow near an uncovered lunch. So tonight, we are going to talk about forbidden ink. Not forbidden because every pigment was banned. Not forbidden because every scribe understood toxicity in the modern chemical sense. Forbidden in the older, stranger, more atmospheric sense. Forbidden because these colors belonged to a world where beauty was expensive, holiness was material, and danger could be ground with a pestle, mixed with gum, and brushed onto the robe of the Virgin Mary. We are going to talk about the toxic ingredients used in illuminated royal manuscripts. Slowly, carefully, with respect for the people who made them, and with a little suspicion toward anything that glows too beautifully on a page. Let us begin with the room. The manuscript workshop is quiet, but not silent. There is the scrape of a knife, the soft rasp of a pumice stone, the wet sound of a brush being shaped against a lip of shell, the faint crack of parchment as it shifts with the air, the scratch of a quill, a cough, a muttered correction, a bench creaking, a page being turned. Perhaps outside the sound of a bell, perhaps rain, perhaps the ordinary noise of a monastery, palace, or urban workshop continuing beyond the walls. The room smells of parchment, ink, glue, dust, wax, skin, wood, and faintly sour mixtures kept in small containers. This is not a room of modern cleanliness. It is a room of controlled mess. There are pigments in small dishes. There are scraps of parchment. There are quills cut and recut. There are pens, knives, rulers, cords, brushes, burnishers, weights, boards, and vessels. There may be horns or shells used as paint cups. There may be little packets of precious color, wrapped carefully and guarded with the seriousness normally reserved for money, because some colors are money in powdered form, especially blue. But we will come to blue later. First, we must understand that a manuscript in the Middle Ages is not simply written. It is built. The parchment must be made from animal skin. Calf, sheep, or goat skin is soaked, scraped, stretched, dried, and prepared. The result is not paper in the modern sense. It is skin transformed into a writing surface through labor. It still remembers the animal in its fibers, its pores, its slight irregularities, its response to moisture. The scribe does not begin with a blank page in the casual modern way. He begins with a prepared surface that has already passed through hands, water, lime, knives, frames, scraping, drying, and trimming. Then the page is ruled. Lines are marked, margins are planned, spaces are left for initials, decoration, miniature scenes, borders, or gold. The scribe writes the text. The illuminator follows, or sometimes works in coordination with the writing. The page becomes layered. Ink first, perhaps, then drawing, then gold, then color, then more detail, then corrections, then drying, then binding eventually if all goes well. At each stage, the page can be ruined, a spill, a bad mixture, a slip of the knife, too much moisture, a flake of gold lifting, a pigment reacting badly, a careless hand, a sneeze at the wrong time, which may be one of the least dignified ways to damage a royal manuscript. Now let us meet the scribe. He sits with a quill. The quill is usually from a bird feather, often goose, though other feathers may be used. It is cut into a writing point with a knife, and that point must be maintained. Writing wears the quill down. The scribe cuts it again, writes, cuts it again, writes. The ink beside him may be iron gall ink. This is one of the great inks of manuscript culture. It can be dark, permanent, and beautifully suited to writing. It bites into the surface. It becomes part of the page. It can remain legible for hundreds of years. It can also be destructive. Iron gall ink is commonly made from oak galls, which are growths produced on oak trees by the activity of insects. These galls contain tannins. The ink also uses a metal salt, often iron sulfate, historically known as vitriol, along with gum arabic and water or another liquid. Recipes vary. Some include wine, vinegar, or other ingredients. The chemistry is powerful. The ink goes down pale or darkens with exposure. It becomes rich brown or black. It has authority. A page written in good iron gall ink looks serious. It is the sort of ink that says, "This sentence intends to outlive you." But over time, if the mixture is too acidic or too rich in metal salts, it can corrode the page. It can darken. It can crack the surface. It can eat through parchment or paper. Letters can become wounds. Lines of writing can become fragile cuts. The very thing that preserves the word can damage the body of the book. This is a grim little irony. The scribe wants permanence. The ink grants it. Then, slowly, over centuries, the ink begins to devour its own home. Imagine the scribe mixing ink. He does not think of himself as handling a future conservation problem. He thinks of color, flow, strength, reliability. The ink must not be too thin. It must not clog the pen. It must sit well on the page. It must dry properly. It must not fade quickly. It must serve the text. Perhaps he has a recipe. Perhaps the workshop has a standard mixture. Perhaps the ink has been bought. Perhaps someone has already soaked the galls, strained the liquid, added vitriol, added gum, and watched it darken. The scribe dips the quill. He writes. The line appears, dark, controlled, elegant. He continues, word after word, psalm after psalm, genealogy after genealogy, royal title after royal title, prayer after prayer. The toxic story has begun quietly in black. Now let us move to white. White seems harmless. White looks clean. White is snow, milk, bone, cloth, candle wax, and polished holiness. In manuscript painting, one important white was lead white. Lead white is beautiful. It is opaque. It covers well. It gives body to highlights. It can make flesh gleam, eyes shine, robes brighten, and architectural details stand forward. It is also lead. Modern people hear that and immediately become cautious. Lead is poisonous. Lead dust, lead compounds, lead contamination. All of these are dangerous. The people of the Middle Ages did not understand lead toxicity in our modern biochemical sense, though harmful effects from some substances were noticed in many crafts across time. For the illuminator, lead white is useful, and usefulness is a powerful argument. A small amount can lift a cheek. A stroke can brighten the fold of a robe. Mixed with other pigments, it can make pinks, pale blues, soft greens, and flesh tones. A face in a royal manuscript might owe its soft glow to lead. A saint's hand, a queen's throat, a child Christ's cheek, all touched by this beautiful poison. The illuminator grinds, mixes, tests. He may handle the powder. He may breathe some dust. He may wipe a brush with his fingers. He may wet the point with his lips, depending on habit, though careful painters knew enough to treat materials with respect. Still, the workshop is not a laboratory. No gloves, no respirator, no warning label, only color, white, smooth, obedient, and quietly dangerous. Now let us turn to red. Red is essential. Red marks importance. Red initials guide the reader. Red can be blood, kingship, martyrdom, sin, love, authority, correction, and decoration. One red pigment used in manuscripts was red lead, also known as minium. It gives a bright orange-red color. It can be vivid and useful for initials and decoration. Like lead white, it contains lead. This means the page can glow with a color that is chemically unfriendly to the human body. There is a reason the word rubric comes from red writing. Red letters organize a text. They announce beginnings. They mark feasts. They distinguish instructions. They make the page navigable. The red is beautiful because the manuscript is not only read, it is seen. In a royal manuscript, red may help structure devotion or display authority. It tells the eye where to go. It makes the text breathe. But again, the beauty is made from something dangerous. The illuminator does not pause to say, perhaps this pleasing initial contains a neurotoxin. He says, perhaps this red needs more gum. Or perhaps it is too thick. Or perhaps the patron will complain if the color is dull. And so the red is laid down, bright as a coal, rich as sealing wax, toxic as a bad idea with excellent funding. There is also vermilion. Vermilion is brilliant, a deep, strong red made from mercury sulfide, either from natural cinnabar or manufactured through processes known in pre-modern color making. Vermilion can be stunning on the page. It has depth and confidence. It can make a manuscript feel rich even before gold is added. But mercury is not gentle. Mercury compounds are dangerous, and cinnabar mining and pigment preparation could expose workers to serious hazards. Again, the illuminator using the prepared pigment may not face the same exposure as the miner or maker, but the material itself belongs to a chain of danger. Think of that chain. A mineral is extracted, crushed, prepared, sold, transported, bought by a workshop, ground again, mixed, applied in a royal manuscript. The king sees red. The queen sees beauty. The bishop sees devotion. The manuscript owner sees status. The pigment maker may have seen dust. The miner may have seen illness. A color on a page can hide a whole economy of risk. This is important. The danger of illuminated manuscripts did not belong only to the person painting the page. It belonged to the people who mined, traded, processed, packed, and transported the materials. The finished book is quiet. The materials were not. Now let us look at yellow. Yellow can be gentle. It can be gold-like. It can warm a border. It can brighten hair, halos, buildings, flowers, patterned cloth, or small details in the margins. One famous yellow pigment was orpiment. Orpiment is gorgeous. It is a golden yellow mineral, arsenic sulfide. The name itself has a rich sound, almost like a spice or treasure. It could produce a color close to gold in warmth, though not in metallic shine. It was valued for its brilliance. It was also arsenic, a beautiful arsenic yellow. This is where the word forbidden begins to feel earned. Imagine a small shell of powdered orpiment on a desk. It looks like sunlight captured in dust. It can make a page gleam. It can imitate luxury. It can warm a saint's robe, a patterned ground, a border leaf. It can sit beside prayers to God while being made of something no one should casually inhale. The illuminator dips a brush. The yellow goes onto the page. It is radiant. The danger is invisible. Orpiment also had compatibility problems. Some pigments do not like each other. Certain mixtures could darken, change, or misbehave. Medieval artists and color makers often knew from experience that some colors should not be mixed or placed together in certain ways. Not because they understood all the chemistry as we do, but because workshops remember failure. A bad mixture ruins a face. A green turns black. A yellow spoils. A lead pigment reacts. A copper pigment bites. A royal manuscript is not the place to learn through disaster. So the illuminator works with caution, passed down through practice. Do not put that there. Do not mix too much. Use this binder. Let it dry. Burnish now. Wait. In the Middle Ages, technique was memory made practical. Now let us talk about green. Green in manuscripts can be beautiful and treacherous. It makes leaves, robes, hills, dragons, borders, little gardens, patterned initials, and decorative vines. One important green pigment was verdigris, a copper-based green produced through the corrosion of copper, often with vinegar or similar substances. Verdigris can be bright and lively, but it is chemically active. It can change, darken, and damage materials if not properly prepared or bound. Copper greens have a certain sharpness. They can look fresh, acidic, alive. A green leaf in a margin may have more chemical mischief in it than its tiny painted shape suggests. Imagine a border full of vines, blue flowers, red berries, gold dots, green leaves. A rabbit in the corner looks guilty about something. The leaves may contain verdigris. That small border, so charming to modern eyes, may be made with a copper compound that conservators must now treat with care because it can darken, spread, or harm the page. The illuminator, again, is not careless. He knows verdigris can be difficult. He may temper it with binders. He may use it carefully. He may choose other greens, such as malachite, a copper carbonate mineral, or mixtures of blue and yellow. But verdigris remains useful because it is strong. Strong colors are tempting. Royal patrons like strength. Pale, weak, sad little colors do not flatter a king's prayer book. Now blue. Blue is where beauty becomes finance. There were several blues in manuscript illumination. Azurite, a copper carbonate mineral, was common and valued. It can be rich, though it may vary. Indigo from plant sources could also be used. The most famous and costly blue was ultramarine, made from lapis lazuli, a stone historically brought from far away, especially from mines in Afghanistan. Ultramarine was not toxic in the same way as lead white or orpiment. Its danger was mostly to the budget. But we must include it because royal manuscripts love expensive blue. A good ultramarine blue is deep, heavenly, and almost unreasonable. It is the blue of the Virgin's mantle in many later works. It is the blue that says, the patron had money and wanted the page to remember it. To make ultramarine from lapis lazuli required skill. The good blue had to be separated from the stone and impurities through complex preparation. It was not simply a matter of smashing a rock and hoping for heaven. The workshop receives the pigment like treasure. It is used with care, not wasted, not left where an apprentice can knock it over. An apprentice knocking over ultramarine would probably consider joining a monastery in a different country. Azurite was also important. It is a copper mineral, less costly than ultramarine, but still beautiful. It can make strong blues. Like other mineral pigments, it must be ground properly. Too coarse and it looks gritty. Too fine and some mineral pigments lose intensity. The hand must learn the material. Pigments are not passive. They have personalities. Lead white covers. Vermilion asserts itself. Orpiment glows but threatens. Verdigris behaves like a clever servant who may betray you later. Ultramarine must be treated like a visiting prince. Carbon black sits quietly and does its work. Now let us talk about black. Black ink and black pigment can come from carbon sources such as lampblack, made from soot, or from charcoal, bone black, or other materials. Carbon black is among the older and more stable colorants. It is less chemically destructive than iron gall ink, though it behaves differently as a writing material. Soot black can be mixed with a binder to make ink or paint. Imagine a lamp flame smoking against a surface. Soot gathers. The soot is scraped, mixed, made into black. There is something almost humble about this. A black made from smoke. Smoke becomes letter. Letter becomes prayer. Prayer becomes royal object. The simplest materials can sit beside the most expensive. A manuscript page may contain soot black and gold leaf, oak gall ink, and lapis blue, arsenic yellow, and egg white, all in one small square of devotional order. This is what makes manuscripts so fascinating. They are not just texts. They are material arguments. They say that the world itself, animal skin, minerals, plants, metals, insects, eggs, gums, and stones, can be gathered, purified, processed, and made to praise God, flatter a ruler, instruct a reader, and display wealth. The page is theology with chemistry under its fingernails. Now let us consider gold. Gold is not toxic in the way some pigments are. Gold is different. Gold is temptation. Gold leaf in a manuscript gives the page its illumination in the most literal sense. Catches light, it shines. In candlelight, gold can flicker and move. A holy figure's halo seems alive. An initial glows, a border flashes, a royal book becomes a small treasury. Gold leaf is beaten incredibly thin. It is handled with breathless care. A surface must be prepared for it. Often a raised ground or adhesive is applied, such as a gesso-like preparation or mordant, depending on technique. The gold is laid down, then burnished with a smooth stone, tooth, or other burnishing tool until it shines. The burnishing is physical. The hand presses. The tool moves. The gold brightens. Too much pressure can damage. Too little leaves dullness. The illuminator must know when to stop, which is one of the hardest lessons in any art. Now, imagine the gold beside toxic color. A halo of gold, a robe shaded with vermilion, a face highlighted with lead white, a green border with verdigris, a yellow detail in orpiment. The page looks holy. The ingredients look like a poisoner's cabinet with better manners. This contrast is the heart of tonight's story. The royal manuscript is an object of devotion and danger, beauty and bodily risk, permanence and decay. Now let us meet the illuminator. Sometimes the scribe and illuminator are the same person. Often they are different specialists. In a large workshop, many hands may work on one manuscript. One person writes, another paints initials, another lays gold, another paints figures, another does borders, another corrects, another binds. The idea of one lonely monk doing everything by candlelight is romantic and sometimes true in smaller contexts. But royal manuscripts often involved organized labor and skilled collaboration. Our illuminator sits with the page before him. The text is already written. Spaces have been left. A large initial waits at the beginning of a psalm. The outlines may be sketched. The gold ground is prepared. He checks the surface. He chooses color. The first layer must be right. Paint in manuscripts is not oil paint. It is often pigment bound with gum, glare from egg white, or other media. The paint must sit on parchment, which is not as absorbent as paper. It can pool, bead, crack, flake, or stain depending on preparation. The illuminator knows the page. He knows whether the parchment side is hair side or flesh side. He knows how much moisture it can take. He knows how to sharpen a brush. The brush may be made from fine animal hair. It must hold a point. The smallest details require astonishing control. A saint's eye, a patterned hem, a vine curl, a dragon's tooth, a tiny red dot. He breathes carefully. Perhaps he steadies one hand with the other. He lays the color. A royal book cannot look uncertain. A king's manuscript must be confident even if the person painting it has not slept well. Now let us imagine the toxic pigments as small characters at the table. Lead white sits heavily, pale and useful. Red lead glows like a small warning. Vermilion is proud, rich, and expensive enough to be vain. Orpiment gleams with golden malice. Verdigris smiles too sharply. Azurite is blue and mineral, a little gritty if mishandled. Ultramarine sits apart, knowing everyone else is jealous. Iron gall ink waits in a pot, darkening, patient, corrosive, and convinced it will outlast them all. The illuminator does not fear them as we might. He respects them. That distinction matters. Craft knowledge is not the same as modern hazard training, but it is not ignorance. Workshops knew that some substances were strong, noxious, irritating, unstable, expensive, or difficult. They knew smells. They knew dust. They knew which mixtures failed. They knew which colors changed. They knew which recipes required care. But they did not know about lead interfering with the nervous system in modern terms. They did not know arsenic as we do. They did not have material safety data sheets tucked beside the psalter. They had recipes, habits, warnings, apprenticeships, mistakes, and occasionally the hard lesson of illness. Now let us turn to the making of pigment. Some pigments were purchased from specialists rather than made in every manuscript workshop. Others might be prepared or refined by the artists themselves. Recipes survive in medieval and early modern sources, showing how color makers transformed materials through grinding, washing, heating, mixing, fermenting, straining, and binding. Alchemy in this context does not simply mean mystical attempts to make gold. It also means practical transformation. Matter changes. Copper becomes green. Lead becomes white or red. Mercury and sulfur become vermilion. Soot becomes black. Lapis becomes ultramarine. Oak galls become ink. Egg white becomes binder. Gold becomes leaf. The manuscript workshop stands near the alchemical imagination because it depends on transformation. A dull mineral becomes a robe. A metal becomes a halo. A gall from a tree becomes scripture. A dead animal's skin becomes a royal prayer book. That is both practical and uncanny. The Middle Ages loved such transformations, or at least lived by them. Now let us talk about egg glaire. Egg glaire is made from egg white, beaten and allowed to settle, used as a binder or medium in painting and gilding. It sounds harmless compared to arsenic and mercury, and mostly it is. But it reminds us of the kitchen-like nature of the workshop. Eggs, gum, honey, vinegar, wine, urine in some craft processes, depending on the recipe, plant juices, mineral powders. The boundary between kitchen, pharmacy, studio, and laboratory is not sharp. A pigment recipe might sound like cooking, except the meal would kill you. Take this powder, grind it well, add gum, add glaire, let it stand, strain. Use carefully. Do not mix with that. Keep covered. The illuminator is part artist, part chemist, part cook, part technician, part servant of the patron, and part gambler against the future behavior of materials. Now let us consider the royal patron. Why would a king, queen, prince, princess, bishop, or noble household pay for such dangerous beauty? because manuscripts were not merely books. They were status objects. They were devotional tools. They were political gifts. They were dynastic memory. They were portable treasure. They were signs of learning, piety, legitimacy, taste, and wealth. A royal manuscript could say, "This ruler is chosen, cultivated, holy, generous, and powerful." It could display a family lineage. It could contain prayers for daily devotion. It could accompany a queen into marriage. It could be offered to a church. It could serve as a diplomatic gift. It could preserve laws, chronicles, genealogies, scripture, liturgy, romance, or instruction. And because it carried such significance, its materials mattered. Gold mattered. Ultramarine mattered. Rich vermilion mattered. Bright initials mattered. Fine parchment mattered. A dull manuscript would not do. If one is making a book for a king, one does not reach for the tired brownish green unless the tired brownish green is absolutely the point, which it rarely is. So the workshop uses the best it can obtain, even if the best contains mercury, even if the yellow contains arsenic, even if the white contains lead. A royal manuscript is a luxury object made from controlled hazards. In this sense, it is not unlike many luxury objects across history. The wealthy see beauty. The workers handle risk. Now let us slow down and imagine the making of one page. The page begins blank, parchment stretched, scraped, cut, and prepared. A prick marks where lines will be ruled. A straight edge guides the ruling. The scribe writes the text in dark ink. He leaves a space for an initial. The writing dries. The page goes to another worker. A design is sketched lightly. A raised ground is laid for gold. It dries. Gold leaf is applied. Some flakes cling. Some refuse. Some float away. Gold is pressed and burnished. Now color begins. Lead white for highlights. Vermilion for red folds. Azurite or ultramarine for blue. Verdigris or another green for leaves. Orpiment for yellow detail. Carbon black for outlines. Tiny strokes build form. The face receives pale color. The eyes are dotted. The robe is shaded. The border grows vines. A little beast appears in the margin, perhaps because the artist was instructed, perhaps because the margin is the one place where the world may misbehave. The page dries. It looks stable. It is not fully stable. No manuscript page is. It has only begun the long work of aging. The iron gall ink may slowly bite. The lead may darken under certain conditions. The verdigris may change. The orpiment may misbehave. The parchment may cockle with humidity. The gold may lift. The colors may fade, darken, crack, or remain astonishingly bright. The book will spend centuries negotiating with air, light, moisture, hands, smoke, storage, war, theft, devotion, neglect, and conservation. But for now, the page is new, and it is beautiful. Now let us consider the scribe's body. This is important. We often talk about the manuscript as object, but every object passed through bodies. The scribe bends over the desk. His back aches, his eyes strain, his fingers cramp. His knife cuts quills again and again. His ink stains his fingers. The illuminator inhales dust, perhaps. He squints. He grinds pigment. He handles metals. He leans toward tiny details until his neck stiffens. The binder presses gatherings. The parchment maker scrapes hides. The gold beater hammers metal into impossibly thin sheets. The miner digs. The merchant carries. The apprentice cleans. Beauty consumes bodies before it reaches a royal hand. The finished manuscript may be placed on a cushion. The maker may have a cough. This is not to make every manuscript tragic. Many craftspeople took pride in their work. Skill is satisfying. Color is satisfying. A perfect line is satisfying. A page that glows as intended is deeply satisfying. But admiration should not make labor invisible. The toxic ingredients remind us that the manuscript is not only spiritual art, it is also physical work. Now let us talk about arsenic yellow again, because it deserves a quiet return. Orpiment's brightness made it desirable, but its danger was real in modern terms. It was used not only in art, but in other contexts too. A substance can be both admired and feared. Pre-modern people knew arsenic compounds could be harmful in some circumstances, though categories and explanations varied. Imagine an apprentice being told to grind the yellow. Not too much, not too carelessly. Keep it separate. Do not waste it. He grinds. The powder brightens. Dust rises if he is rough. The master snaps at him, not because of occupational safety regulations, but because pigment is expensive and mistakes are costly. Still, the warning may save him from breathing more dust. Sometimes economy and safety accidentally agree. The yellow is mixed. It becomes paint. It goes into a royal border, a tiny golden flower, a lion's mane, a patterned textile, a decorative ground. Centuries later, a conservator sees it differently, not as merely yellow, but as arsenic sulfide. It is identified, recorded, and handled with care. The page has changed professions. Once devotional object, now museum object. Once touched by a prayerful hand, now examined by science. The pigment remains. Now let us look at mercury red. Vermilion has a presence that other reds envy. It can be bold and warm. It can announce authority. It can make a royal initial blaze. It can mark sacred blood or royal fabric. It can turn a tiny painted book into a theater of color. But mercury compounds travel with a shadow. In the making of vermilion, heating mercury and sulfur could release dangerous fumes if done under poor conditions. The preparation of such pigments was not a harmless hobby. Even if the illuminator bought prepared vermilion, somewhere the color had been made or mined. The royal manuscript carries that hidden furnace. The page does not say so. It simply glows red. This is one of the eerie things about materials. The violence of extraction and preparation can become silence in the finished object. A mineral is torn from earth. A metal is beaten thin. A hide is scraped. A pigment is ground. A worker coughs. A page glows. The royal owner sees devotion. The modern viewer sees art. The material remembers everything. Now let us consider lead again. Lead appears in white and red pigments, and in other artistic contexts. It was useful, workable, heavy, common enough, and dangerously familiar. People used lead for pipes, roofs, weights, seals, and pigments. Its very usefulness made it widespread. Lead white was one of the most important whites in European painting for centuries. To make it, historical processes often exposed lead to vinegar vapors and organic matter, creating corrosion products that could be scraped and processed. The making of lead white was notoriously unpleasant in later historical accounts. The pigment, once produced, was treasured by painters for its covering power and handling. In a manuscript, lead white might create a tiny highlight in an eye. Think about that. A spark of life in a saint's eye made from lead. A white line on a fold. A pale cheek. A pearl. A flower. The toxic material becomes delicacy. This is one reason the subject is so compelling. The dangerous ingredient is not always used in dramatic places. Sometimes it is a dot, a small lift, a whisper of light. A poison can be humble. Now let us talk about the margins. The margins of illuminated manuscripts are often where the world becomes strange. Vines curl, birds perch, hybrid creatures play instruments, knights fight snails, monkeys imitate humans, rabbits behave like criminals, dragons bite leaves, faces peer from foliage. The sacred text remains central, but the margins allow play, satire, anxiety, humor, and visual excess. These little marginal creatures may be made with the same dangerous pigments as holy figures. A ridiculous rabbit may contain lead white. A dragon's wing may contain verdigris. A monkey's red cap may contain vermilion. An absurd little creature sticking out its tongue may be painted with materials that modern conservators classify as hazardous. There is something perfect about that. The toxic pigments do not care whether they serve a saint or a snail-fighting knight. Chemistry is not impressed by iconography. Now let us imagine a royal book of hours, small enough for private devotion, rich enough to show rank. The owner might be a queen, princess, duchess, or noblewoman. She opens the book at the hours of the Virgin. The page glows, blue mantle, gold halo, red initials, green borders, tiny flowers. Perhaps her family arms somewhere. Perhaps portraits. Perhaps prayers added for her use. She touches the page. Maybe not the paint. Maybe the edge. Still, the book is intimate. It comes near the body. It is held in the hand. It is kissed, perhaps. It is read by candlelight. It is prayed over. The pigments are not abstract. They live close to skin, breath, lips, sleeves, and tears. A manuscript is not only viewed, it is handled. Royal manuscripts could be treasured, used, inherited, displayed, hidden, gifted, and carried. Their beauty was tactile as well as visual. That intimacy makes the toxic materials feel stranger. A prayer book, meant to guide the soul, carries lead and arsenic in its beauty. A queen may read from a page with orpiment flowers. A child prince may be taught from initials made bright with red lead. A bishop may chant from a book whose dark ink slowly burns its way through the page. The holy and hazardous sit very close together. Now let us think about preservation. Many illuminated manuscripts have survived because they were valued. They were stored, copied, repaired, rebound, collected, protected, or simply lucky. But survival is not passive. Materials age. Some pigments remain stable. Others change. Iron gall ink corrodes. Copper greens can cause problems. Lead pigments can darken. Organic dyes can fade. Silver tarnishes. Gold usually remains noble, which is one reason people enjoy it. Modern conservators study manuscripts using careful imaging and analysis. They may use X-ray fluorescence, Raman spectroscopy, infrared imaging, microscopy, and other tools to identify pigments without damaging the page. What the scribe knew by recipe, the conservator knows by spectra and elemental signal. The manuscript, once made by craft, is now read by science. A blue may reveal itself as azurite, a yellow as orpiment, a red as vermilion or red lead, a white as lead white, a green as verdigris or malachite, a black as carbon or iron gall. The page becomes a map of materials, and through that map we can see trade, cost, workshop practice, artistic choice, and risk. A royal manuscript is not only art history, it is chemistry history, economic history, medical history, labor history, theology with poison in the paint box. Now let us return to the workshop, late in the day. The light is failing. Candlelight is not ideal for color work. It changes what the eye sees. Many careful tasks require daylight, especially color matching and fine painting. The scribe may continue if light allows, but even writing becomes harder as the room darkens. The illuminator covers pigments, or should. He rinses brushes. He checks the page. He sees a small mistake, perhaps a tiny smudge near a border. He considers scraping. Parchment can sometimes be scraped carefully to remove errors, but paint and gold are less forgiving. A knife can correct or ruin. The page is expensive. The patron is important. He waits. Better to correct in morning light. The pigments rest in their shells. Lead white, vermilion, orpiment, verdigris, azurite, carbon black, maybe ultramarine locked away. Iron gall ink dark in its pot. The The workshop quiets. The page dries. Toxic colors sleep. There is something unsettling about a closed manuscript workshop at night. The colors remain potent even when no one is using them. The materials sit quietly in cups and packets. A small dish of yellow arsenic, a red mercury compound, lead white powder, copper green, ink with metal salts. No one is being dramatic. No one is committing murder. No one is casting a spell. They are making a book. That is the strange thing. Danger does not always arrive with a dagger. Sometimes it arrives as a supply order. Now let us consider the apprentices. An apprentice learns by doing. He prepares materials, cleans tools, grinds pigments, rules lines, fills minor initials, copies simple text, watches the master, makes mistakes, receives correction, and gradually becomes useful. In a manuscript workshop, an apprentice might spend long hours on tasks that seem boring but are essential. Grinding pigment is one such task. The stone and muller move in circles. The powder becomes finer. Liquid is added. The paste changes. The apprentice learns texture by feel. Too gritty, too thin, too thick, too dry, too much binder, not enough. This sensory learning is hard to write down. A recipe may say grind well, but what is well? The hand must learn. If the pigment is harmless, the lesson is merely tedious. If the pigment contains lead, arsenic, mercury, or copper, the lesson has another dimension. Do not raise dust. Do not waste. Do not mix carelessly. Do not lick that brush. One hopes someone said this often, but one suspects someone did not always listen. Apprentices in every century are apprentices. Now let us think about the social value of color. In the Middle Ages, color was not merely decorative. Colors had symbolic meanings, economic meanings, and practical functions. Red initials helped structure a text. Gold indicated holiness and prestige. Blue could signal heavenly significance and expense. Purple could evoke imperial tradition. White, green, black, and yellow all carried associations depending on context. Royal manuscripts used color to communicate power. A king's image in a manuscript is not just a portrait. It is an argument about order. Gold says radiance. Blue says wealth and heaven. Red says authority and sacrifice. Fine detail says skilled labor has been commanded and paid for. A decorated genealogy says lineage is not merely known, but displayed. The toxic pigments are part of that authority. Power appears in dangerous materials made obedient. The king does not grind the lead. The queen does not prepare the arsenic yellow. The prince does not beat the gold. Others do that. The manuscript concentrates labor and risk into beauty that the elite can hold. This is true of many luxury arts, but manuscripts make it especially intimate because they are so small. A whole world of labor fits between two covers. Now let us talk about insects. Not all colors came from minerals and metals. Some came from organic sources, including plants and insects. Red dyes could be made from kermes, an insect source prized in textiles and sometimes connected to color-making traditions. Other organic colorants included matter from plants, folium, Brazilwood, saffron, weld, and others depending on period and place. These are not all toxic in the same sense. Some are fragile, some fade, some shift, some are expensive. But they remind us that manuscript color came from a wide world: earth, plant, animal, metal, and trade. A red may be insect, a blue may be stone, a black may be smoke, a green may be corroded copper, a yellow may be arsenic mineral, a white may be lead, a binder may be egg, a page may be calf skin. The book is a quiet gathering of bodies and substances. This gives illuminated manuscripts their almost uncanny richness. They are cultural objects made from nature's leftovers: wounds, secretions, minerals, and metals, disciplined into prayer and prestige. Now let us imagine the royal owner receiving the finished book. The manuscript is bound, perhaps in leather, perhaps with clasps, perhaps with decorated covers if the patron is wealthy enough. It is presented. The patron opens it. The first page gleams. The gold catches light. The blue is deep. The red is clear. The green border is lively. The white highlights sparkle. The black text is crisp. Everyone sees success. No one says, "Behold the carefully arranged toxins." They say, "Beautiful." They say, "Worthy." They say, "Pious." They say, "Magnificent." The book enters the royal household. It may be kept in a chapel, or a chamber, or a treasury, or carried while traveling. It may be used daily. It may be shown to visitors. It may become part of a dowry. It may be inherited by a daughter. It may be seized during political change. It may be pawned. It may be given to a monastery for prayers. It may survive a fire by chance. It may be stolen, rebound, cut apart, or collected centuries later. Its pigments continue their slow chemical lives. The book never stops changing. That is another secret of manuscripts. They look still, but they are not still. Parchment responds to humidity. Pigments age, bindings strain, ink corrodes, gold lifts, pages darken from hands, wax drips, smoke stains, water damages, mold creeps if conditions fail. A manuscript is a living corpse of materials, if one wants to be slightly dramatic before bedtime. It is dead skin, dead plants, mineral dust, metal leaf, insect color, egg binder, and human intention, still negotiating with time. Now let us return to iron gall ink, because it is the dark thread through so many books. Its permanence made it beloved. Its corrosion makes it feared. When iron gall ink eats into a page, the letters can become brittle. The writing can crack. In severe cases, the written lines seem to cut through the support, leaving holes where words once were. conservators must handle such pages with great care. The ink that preserved legal charters, music, literature, prayers, and accounts also placed them at risk. In the Middle Ages, this future damage was not always obvious. A freshly written text looked strong. A century later, perhaps still strong. Several centuries later, depending on recipe, environment, and support, the problem might emerge more clearly. This is the slow violence of chemistry. No drama, no fire, no blade, only ink reacting across time. A scribe writes a prayer. The prayer outlives the scribe. The ink outlives the prayer's first reader. Then the ink begins to wound the page on which the prayer survives. It is hard not to find that meaningful. Now let us talk about correction. Scribes made errors. They skipped words, repeated lines, misspelled names, lost their place, misread exemplars, grew tired. The correction knife was always near. On parchment, a mistake could sometimes be scraped away and rewritten. This is possible because parchment is skin, and the ink sits in and on the surface in ways that allow careful removal. But correction leaves traces. A scraped patch, a thinner surface, a rewritten letter, a change in color. If iron gall ink has bitten deeply, scraping becomes harder. If pigment is involved, correction may be nearly impossible. The page preserves both intention and failure. Royal manuscripts, for all their splendor, contain human mistakes. A slightly crooked line, a face corrected, a border adjusted, a patch where gold did not behave, a pigment that flaked. Toxic materials do not prevent ordinary error. They simply make the error more expensive. Now let us consider candlelight. Illuminated manuscripts were often viewed by natural light, but also by candle or lamp. Gold leaf under moving flame becomes animated. The page seems to breathe. The blue deepens. Red warms. Shadows move in the folds of painted robes. The gold halo around a saint's head flashes, disappears, flashes again. This effect helps explain why illumination mattered. The manuscript is not a flat digital image. It is an object that performs under light. Gold catches flame. Pigments absorb and reflect differently. The royal reader in a dim chamber sees a page that feels alive. And in that living glow are the lead, mercury, copper, and arsenic colors resting beneath prayer. The beauty is not despite the material world. It is made from it. That is very much the spirit of the Middle Ages. Matter matters. Relics matter. Bread and wine matter. Water in baptism matters. Oil in anointing matters. Parchment, pigment, and gold matter. The divine is encountered through things, even dangerous things. Now let us speak of storage. A royal manuscript may be kept in a chest, wrapped in cloth, stored in a chapel, placed in a library, or carried in a pouch depending on type and use. Storage conditions matter greatly. Too damp and mold threatens. Too dry and parchment stiffens. Too much handling and paint wears. Too much light and organic colorants fade. Smoke can darken. Vermin can damage. Fire can destroy all. The toxic ingredients do not protect the book from ordinary harm. A mouse is not morally restrained by arsenic yellow in a border. A damp room is not impressed by gold leaf. A careless reader can still smudge a page made for a king. So manuscripts require care. In the Middle Ages, care may mean wrapping, locking, keeping away from damp, repairing binding, and controlling access. In the modern world, care means climate control, supports, limited light exposure, imaging, analysis, and minimal handling. The book has always needed guardians. First scribes, then owners, then librarians, then conservators. The dangerous colors remain under guard. Now let us imagine a conservator today, though only briefly, because our story belongs mostly to the Middle Ages. The conservator looks at the manuscript under magnification. The page is no longer new. A green area has darkened. A red remains strong. The ink has browned. The gold is still bright. A yellow tests as orpiment. The white tests as lead white. The conservator does not gasp. Conservators are not paid to gasp. They observe. They note condition. They advise handling. They manage light. They stabilize. They do not casually touch the pigment. The manuscript has passed from royal devotion to scientific caution. The same page once kissed in prayer is now monitored for arsenic, lead, and copper compounds. History has a dry sense of humor. Now let us return to the original makers for a slower final movement. The scribe at his desk, the illuminator beside him or in another room, the patron far away, the parchment waiting, the pigments prepared. Outside, the world is busy. A cart passes, a bell rings, a servant carries water, a monk chants, a nobleman argues about land, a queen prays for a child, a cook sharpens a knife, a merchant calculates the cost of blue. Inside, the page grows, letter by letter, line by line, initial by initial, gold ground, blue robe, red border, green leaves, white highlights, yellow flowers, black outlines. The materials are dangerous, but the process is patient. This is perhaps the strangest contrast. Toxicity sounds sudden. Poison sounds like a goblet at a banquet. But manuscript toxicity is slow. Slow exposure. Slow corrosion. Slow color change. Slow risk hidden in beauty. The whole art is slow. Preparing skin. Grinding pigment. Writing text. Laying gold. Painting detail. Binding gatherings. Reading prayers. A manuscript is slow danger made into slow beauty. That is not a bad title for the whole subject. Now we should be fair. Not every pigment was deadly. Not every manuscript was a hazard. Not every scribe was poisoned. Not every workshop was a pit of chemical doom. Carbon black was relatively stable. Gold was not the problem. Many organic colors were more fragile than poisonous, and the degree of risk depended on form, quantity, preparation, exposure, and handling. A finished manuscript sitting, closed on a lectern, is not the same as breathing powdered orpiment during grinding. We should not turn every illuminator into a martyr of chemistry, but neither should we imagine the manuscript workshop as harmless. The materials were strong. Some were toxic. Some were corrosive. Some were unstable. Some were costly enough to create pressure and secrecy. Some could damage the page. Some could damage the maker. The beauty had teeth. That is the point. Now let us think about why this topic feels forbidden. A royal illuminated manuscript seems like the opposite of danger. It is careful, devotional, expensive, protected. It belongs to libraries and chapels and queens. It seems refined, but refinement can hide violence. The white is lead. The red may be mercury or lead. The yellow may be arsenic. The green may be copper corrosion. The black ink may slowly eat the page. The blue may have traveled across continents at great cost. The gold may have been beaten by laboring hands until it became thinner than breath. The parchment was once skin. The book is beautiful because the world was processed intensely. Beauty in the Middle Ages was not clean. It was material. It came from scraping, soaking, grinding, boiling, beating, binding, cutting, and burnishing. It came from animal bodies, mineral veins, plant wounds, insect growths, metal corrosion, and human patience. The royal page is a quiet concentration of the earth's dangerous colors. Now let us imagine the page completed. A king kneels in miniature before a saint. His robe is blue. His crown is gold. The saint's halo glows. Red initials frame the prayer. Green vines curl around the margin. White highlights sit on the folds. Yellow details warm the pattern. The text below is dark and formal. The page says order. The page says devotion. The page says power. But under the image, another story waits. The blue came by trade. The white came by lead. The red came by mercury or lead. The yellow came by arsenic. The green came by copper. The black came by gall and vitriol. The gold came by hammering. The parchment came by skin. The page is a kingdom of materials, ruled by the eye, governed by the hand, haunted by chemistry. Now evening comes again. The workshop closes. The royal manuscript lies flat, unfinished but promising. The pigments are covered. The brushes are cleaned. The quills are set aside. The knife is placed where it can be found tomorrow. The illuminator stands and stretches a stiff back. The scribe rubs stained fingers. An apprentice sweeps a little colored dust from the bench, hopefully not into the air, though he probably does a poor job. The door closes. The room darkens. In the silence, nothing happens. Lead white waits. Vermilion waits. Orpiment waits. Verdigris waits. Iron gall ink waits. Gold waits without anxiety, because gold is annoyingly confident. The the page waits too. Tomorrow the work will continue. Another leaf, another initial, another saint, another king, another red line, another blue robe, another green vine, another toxic speck of beauty added to a book meant to last longer than the hand that painted it. And it may last. That is the remarkable thing. Despite the danger, despite the corrosion, despite the flaking, fading, damp, fire, theft, war, neglect, and repair, many manuscripts did survive. They survived with their pigments still visible, their gold still bright, their ink still readable, their margins still strange, their toxic ingredients still quietly present. Are beautiful, they are hazardous, they are devotional, they are chemical, they are royal, they are handmade, they are not innocent. So when we see an illuminated manuscript from the Middle Ages, let us look a little longer. Not only at the saint, not only at the king, not only at the gold. Look at the red, look at the yellow, look at the green, look at the white spark in the eye, look at the dark letters. Behind each color is a recipe. Behind each recipe, a material. Behind each material, a risk. Behind each risk, a worker. And behind the worker, the long human belief that beauty is worth trouble. Sometimes too much trouble. Sometimes dangerous trouble. But trouble all the same. Tonight, then, we leave the manuscript closed. The clasp is fastened. The cover rests in shadow. Inside, the pages hold their prayers, their colors, their poisons, and their patience. The royal owner is gone. The scribe is gone. The illuminator is gone. The apprentice who spilled a little green pigment and hoped no one noticed is gone. The room is gone. The kingdom is gone. But the page remains. Lead white still pale. Vermilion still red. Orpiment still golden. Verdigris still green. Iron gall ink still dark. Gold still catching whatever light is allowed to touch it. A small, silent object from the Middle Ages, beautiful enough for a king, dangerous enough for a warning, and patient enough to wait for centuries behind glass.